So when I was growing up, I went to church with my grandmother, and my grandmother's church was nothing like our church. So let me paint a picture for you real quick. There was a brick building. It was really, really small. It had a choir loft, piano, organ, and this big, huge wooden podium for the pastor. The pews were hard and wooden. There was real thin cushions on them. And to be honest, it kind of smelled a little funny. But at the very front of the sanctuary, there was a door that led downstairs to some Sunday school rooms. And every single Sunday, we'd get there early, I'd go down, get a drink of water from the water fountain, sit in our rooms real quietly, and the teacher would show up. And if we were there, we'd get a star on a poster, kind of like this. And that star would be representative that we were there. You know, if we brought our Bible, we got another star. You know, if we read our lesson, we'd get another star. I mean, you get the idea. We were rewarded for doing and for following the rules. And while that church, they loved God and they taught me a lot of really valuable things. If I'm totally honest, that's when it all began. That's really when I changed my view of God, when I started viewing God the way most people do. See, most religions are built on the idea that there is a good God and bad people. And see, at an early age, I started seeing myself as a bad person trying to please a good God by just keeping the rules. Now, where do we get that notion? Where do we get the notion that for God to love us and accept us and to accept our prayers that we have to be good and behave? I really don't know, because that's not God's message at all. In fact, God's message is totally the opposite. So I ask you again, where do we get this idea? I mean, sure, there may be some people out there that have had the exact experience as me, or maybe just similar experiences, but the truth is, it's probably something a whole lot bigger. I mean, for most people, if you think about it, it probably goes back to the story of the Ten Commandments. Now, when most of us look at the Ten Commandments, we think about the rules. We think about its rules to keep. Maybe you were even taught that the Big Ten were God's measuring stick, like He had some sort of poster in heaven with your name and a star every time you did it right. But what if that's not true? What if that's not the purpose of the Ten Commandments? Really, what if that's not the purpose of any of God's laws? See, the thing about rules or laws is that they tell you a lot about the person who made them. You know, for instance, when I got my driver's license, my mom made this rule that said, hey, you have to be home 4 nights a week. Now, that's not because she didn't want me to have any fun. I mean, if she didn't want me to have any fun, she would have just said, hey, you can't go out, period. But what it said is that she valued family time, and that rule was a way to make that happen. See, rules can tell you a whole lot about the person that makes them. So if you think about it that way, God's laws, God's rules, they just reveal who God is. And if that's true, maybe we've missed the whole point about the Ten Commandments. Maybe it's not about bad people keeping rules so that they can keep a good God happy. You know, it's crazy, but if you read the entire story of the Exodus, there's something that I think we all think happened, and we assume that this happened this way, but you'll never find it. I mean, when most of us think of the story of the Ten Commandments, we think of it as something like this. A man goes up on a mountain, he hears a big voice. That voice writes 10 things down. The man takes the 10 things down to the people and he says, hey, I just talked to God, and that guy sounds big, so here's 10 things that we need to do so that we don't get in trouble. You know, but that's not how it happened at all. If you open Scripture to Exodus 1, you find a race of people who've been enslaved in a foreign country all their lives. And these people, they haven't heard from God in hundreds of years. And so their God is really only something that they've heard of from their parents, and really that their parents had only heard of from their parents. You know, I'm sure some of them even wondered if God existed at all. They were pretty much at ground zero spiritually. So finally, God sends a deliverer, Moses. And after miracle after miracle after miracle, God proves to these people not only that He exists, but that He's on their side. And so if you read on in the story, you find this slave generation of this race of people, the ones that had no hope, had no relationship with God. Now they have a relationship with the God that they had heard about from their parents. They have had an experience with that God that they had heard stories about. Now this is huge because this sets up the Ten Commandments. I mean, even God reminds the children of Israel about it before He gives the Ten Commandments. In Exodus 20, verse 1, it says, God spoke all these words saying, I am the Lord your God. Now, did you catch that? He says, your God. Not your great-grandparents' God, not your grandparents' God, not even your parents' God. He says, I'm your God. It's personal. God's saying, listen, before I tell you about me, before I tell you who I am, because rules tell us who someone is, before I do any of that, I want to let you know that number one, I exist. Number two, I'm with you. It's a personal relationship. And number three, I'm worth following. And that's why all those things happened in Israel. That's why all the miracles happened. See, God acted first. God loved first. God proved Himself first. Before there was any requirements, before He had asked the children of Israel to do anything, He showed His character first. He brought love into the relationship first. He proved that there was a relationship first. See, when we look at the Ten Commandments clearly, we see that they're not just a list of rules that bad people have to keep so that God can be happy, because relationship always precedes rules with God. So for the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at some of the Ten Commandments, but we're going to look in the context of our relationship with God first.